Well, my D-Gens, it's Zenless anniversary time, and today we've got Void Hunter level Yixuan. Now, I've got to say, when I put my dirty little paws on her for the first time, I was pretty confused, you know, and if you're here, then you might be as well. So today, let's talk Yixuan, let's talk through all of her nuances, the mindset, and cover off a few things that you may not know. But before we get into it, I need to remind y'all that 2.0 has dropped. We've got an S rank agent selector, which is already freaking nuts. But on top of that, we've got an S rank W engine weapon selector. We're also going to get 30 limited pulls, 10 boot bonds, protagonist skins, anniversary avatars, titles, and a lot more. So come join the game if you haven't already. Alright, so let's start off with some of the easiest stuff. But if you do know all of this, then skip ahead to learn how to pilot her. First up is Auric Inc., which is Yixuan's personal element. Now, this is essentially saying, okay, Yixuan gets her own anomaly build-up gauge, and it can also trigger disorder with anything, including corruption itself. In practice though, this thing doesn't mean too much. It doesn't really change very much about her gameplay because Yixuan is more centered around like an attacker as opposed to being an anomaly unit. She is less like Miyabi, and she is more like Evelyn or Ellen. And so on that note, we've also got her new class, which is Rupture. And the TLDR of Rupture is that they can use this new stat called Sheer Force, this guy down here. And this Sheer Force stat is based on attack, but for Yixuan specifically, she scales HP into Sheer Force. But the most important part about all of this is coming back up to Rupture. It's that her Sheer Force, her sheer damage, ignores enemy defenses. And so what this means is that disc 5 penetration ratio is useless. Rena, unfortunately, dead in the ditch. But most sadly, Nicole, defense down 40%. They had to take down our queen somehow, and this is how they did it. And so therefore, when we're playing Rupture characters such as Yixuan, we're going to be looking for things like damage buffs or damage taken buffs like Caesar King. We've got extra stun multipliers from Trigger, and of course, damage buffs from Astra Yao. And then of course, there is the Panda, who just straight up gives Sheer Force buff. Now, let's talk about Panda a little bit later. You can skip ahead if you want to see what I have to say about old mate over here. Because my DGens, it's time to get into Yixuan's kit. Alright, and so let's talk about mindset first. And the most important part of Yixuan's kit are her two ultimates. And the reason that they're so important is because, well, first of all, there are two of them. Second of all, they do big booty damage. But also thirdly, they give a 40% crit damage buff for 15 seconds. And that is utterly nutty. And so I would say that the ultimate goal for Yixuan is to pull off as many ultimates as possible, especially within the stun windows. We've got to cram that shit in, you know? All right, and so in that case, let's talk about her ultimates. So again, two ultimates. The first one is the traditional one in which we have max decibels, and you can see our ultimate is flashing over here. But the second one is dependent on this gauge over here, which doesn't have anything right now, but you can see it's filling up. And so to fill up this gauge, we have to expend our energy, or for Rupture classes, it's adrenaline. Now, if I do say energy, my apologies, I meant adrenaline, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And so to consume energy, we have a couple of different options. We can either use the hold basic attack, which is this freaking awesome vortex thing right here. And remember, this thing does 30% more damage to stunned enemies. And so when we put enemies into stun, we're going to be throwing this thing straight at them. And the other way to spend energy and generate gauge is to tap EX skill when we have energy. So just like this, I'm just going to tap EX skill 3 times. 1, 2, and then 3, the wing thing, which is so freaking awesome. And so you can see our gauge is now completely filled up. We have ultimate here, and we have ultimate here as well. And so if we have both ultimates up, I think the top one gets prioritized. I'm just going to click it, ultimate, and that should expend our entire gauge. You can see it's gone to 0. And what happens is that we get this floating orange moon thing. Now, when we have this moon thing over here, we can do this like crazy ghost move. So it's no direction, completely neutral, just hold dodge. That's it. So hold dodge, and you can see boom, 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 those ghosts coming around, and holy crap, it's a wild ride. And so now you can see we don't have the orange symbol thing over here. I'm going to do the same thing. It's not going to be the same. There's no ghosts, and it's not nearly as crazy. What I do have to say though, with the orange yin yang symbol, the orange moon thing, when we use this enhanced version, like this one with the ghosts, we get a crap ton of adrenaline. And so you could hopefully see our adrenaline coming back up as we used that move. So you can see why it's so important to cycle through and push for the ultimates. And so in that case, let's start talking about the rotations themselves. All right, and so in the stun build-up phase, there's kind of two things that we're going to be doing. The first is just basic attacks as filler, but what you really need to focus on is using your skills. And so I'm talking about the EX1, EX2, and then EX3. Man, So freaking awesome. So the first thing you have to know is that this thing does an insane amount of damage. It's got like super high multipliers. But what you can and have to do is you have to use it as a perfect counter, exactly like Yanagi. So as you can see, I tapped EX skill at the moment that homeboy was trying to hit me, and I hit him back twice as hard. So I'm going to do it again. Boom. You can see all of those damn effects. It's freaking awesome. There is going to be crazy feedback. Now there is a hold EX version. This is what it looks like. So it kind of puts you in like a holding state and it's waiting for him to hit you. Man, this is freaking pleb move. Do not do that shit. Never use hold EX. Holding EX like this is just asking for you to lose DPS because it's taking so much time. You're waiting for him. Why don't you instead weave in some basic attacks and do some other shit and then time it exactly just like that. Bada bing, bada boom, and you feel like a freaking god at the same time. Like seriously, for real, if you're playing like this, you might as well play a Honkai Star Rail because you're freaking waiting for your turn. All right, and so the reason why it's so important to counter is because we actually get an adrenaline refund. So I'm gonna go pull it off, and I want you guys to watch the adrenaline gauge. So homeboy's gonna attack, boom, and look at all of that adrenaline coming home. Holy mother of God. And so what I can guarantee you is that if you are able to successfully perfect counter with this, you will be able to use EX 1, 2, 3 every single time. It will give you a refund big enough for you to use the entire EX 1, 2, 3 chain. I'm going to recharge just enough for an EX 1. So I'm going to try do an EX 1, 2, 3 without countering. And you can see I don't have enough to actually get into the last big explosion thing because I didn't counter because I'm a freaking noob. And so let's do that again, except I'm going to counter this time. And you can see I have like exactly enough. It's gone a little bit more. Counter, and then 2, and then 3. Suddenly I have enough energy because of the refund. All I can say is thank you very much for the refund and the big DPS gains. And so of course, the more we can use this EX 1, 2, 3, the more we can access our ultimates, and more ultimates means more damage. So my friends, this is truly the bread and butter of Yixuan. Now, what you do need to know about the EX skill is that not only can it block the yellow flashes and the red flashes, but it can also block like literally anything. So that's a yellow flash very clearly there. I'm just gonna wait for homeboy to do the charge up skill. He's not going to do any indication, and boom, you can see I can actually block that. So anything is blockable with her EX skill. Absolutely awesome because it rewards the high skill players. All right, and so one last thing about the EX skill is that you can chain it directly into Auric Array, the ghost thing that we saw before. So what you need to do is EX 1, 2, 3 into hold dodge. So EX 1 for counter, 2, and then 3, and I'm just gonna hold my dodge button, and you can see boom, boom, boom. We don't have to do like some crazy dodge shit. We go straight into the Auric Array, into the ghost thing. Now that only works when you have the orange symbol over here, because if, for example, I'm gonna do it again, EX1, EX2, and then EX3, I'm gonna hold, and it's doing like that backstep thing. We don't want that, right? Because it's freaking time, and time wasted is DPS loss. All right, and so the reality of Yixuan is that you're not always going to have energy. You're going to be able to pull this thing off like every so often, but then you see like, oh God, I can't even do an EX counter anymore. And so in that case, what do? Well, the first is you're just going to basic attack, but also focus on dodging. And the reason that you want to focus on dodging is because let's do a perfect dodge. Boom, 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 dodge. You can see my adrenaline just recovered. Let me show you again. Nice dodge, perfect dodge, big adrenaline gains. That said though, know that this thing has a 1 second internal cooldown for the energy regeneration. So obviously you can dodge as much as you want, but you can only regenerate energy once every 1 second, which isn't too bad. But if you are fighting a really aggressive enemy, you do have another option, and that is the parry clang clang. So watch the adrenaline, and I'm going to go boom, and you can see, hopefully, if I go back into my Yixuan, her energy is freaking full because it also gives the same amount as the dodge. So just know that for hyper aggressive enemies, if you are like dodging, you should dodge, and then you should also clang clang to get the most out of the energy regeneration. That one was actually a really good example. That was within 1 second. And so just speaking of energy regeneration, let me just burn all of this, and I want to show you guys a little bit more. And the first thing is that whenever she procs anomaly, once every 10 seconds, she gets adrenaline back. So I'm about to push him into corruption. So watch our gauge up here. I'm going to push him in, and it should be boom, boom, boom. And you can see a big jump up because that was 10 energy refund thanks to that corruption just then. And the other way of regenerating energy is actually using your teammates' ultimates. So let's use Trigger's ultimate. And what you're going to see when I swap back is that her adrenaline is actually slowly going up. It's 2 adrenaline per second. And so it's just stopped there. And if I go over and use my Astra's one and then swap back to Yixuan, hopefully you should see the same thing. So as you can see, her adrenaline is just regenerating, 10 seconds, 2, times 10, 20 adrenaline. All right, and so the last thing I did want to mention is that you can actually swap cancel this thing, and you guys saw how long it took, right? So I'm just going to EX1 into EX2, and I'm just going to EX3 and then go straight into Auric Array, and then you can see I've switched into a different character, and she's still freaking going. Holy crap, Yixuan. And on top of that, she can do it with the non-enhanced version as well. So I'm just going to do it and then swap, boom. And as you can see, she is going to pull off the entire yin-yang thing. All right, next, let's start talking about what we should do when we push the enemy into the stun window. All right, and so before we get into the stun window, so he's at 98%, we ideally have both of our ultimates charged, so you can see 1 and 2 over here, but also a whole bunch of energy. And the reason is because when we put him into stun, we're going to throw an ultimate first to get 40% crit damage buff, and then throw another ultimate because it does big damage, and then vortex. And ideally, we enter the chain attack with somebody else so that we can just use Yixuan and then cancel. So I'm just going to do that. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to use Yixuan, and then I'm going to cancel immediately after, and then I'm going to ultimate. Boom, boom, boom. And then ultimate again, wait for all of the damage to land. And then I'm going to vortex immediately after. So hopefully it's like zip. And then again, and I was a little bit too late. But just remember that the stun windows are going to vary depending on if they're elites like this or if they're going to be full-fledged bosses. But the most important thing, my DGens, is that you get both of the ultimates out in the stun window. And then if possible, also use up your energy with the vortex right there, because that bad boy, remember, it does 30% extra damage during stun. And so what you will have noticed is that I don't use the ghost thing, the Auric Array, whilst they're in stun. And the truth is that it doesn't do that much damage, but it gives you a shitload of adrenaline. But on top of that, we want to chain it with our EX123 anyway, because it cancels the animation. So there's no rush in using it during the stun window. We just want to go EX, EX, and then EX and hold dodge and We want to use it outside of the stun window, especially because it gives us so much adrenaline for us to then go and do the counters. All right, and so therefore, the summary of it is that during the stun building phase, we're going to try to get as many EX skill counters as we can. Then we do perfect dodges and we do parries. And of course, basic attacks to filler. Now, only use the yin-yang suck thing, the whole dodge thing, to group enemies, to do the big sucky. And remember to not use the vortex at all. And so therefore, when we're in the stun phase, depending on how much time you have, ultimate takes the highest priority, both ultimates. So ultimate, and then vortex. Or if the stun window is somehow quite long because of buffs or because of lighter or whatever, then you can do something like ultimate, vortex, ultimate, vortex to kind of spread out that 40% crit damage buff. All right, now in terms of gear, relatively straightforward. So we're looking for the 4-piece yin-yang set, as you can see over here, Yunkui Tails. This bad boy was essentially made for Yixuan. And you just need to remember that this guy actually gives you 12% crit rate to your Yixuan. So 100% minus 12%, 88% is kind of your crit rate cap. And so yeah, 4-piece yin-yang set, and then we've got 2-piece of any offensive set. Now remember, you cannot use attack, we're looking for HP. So that does mean that you can't use the Hormone Punk, because this guy's plus 10% attack, as well as the Astra set. So this guy over here, also 10% attack. Completely useless on Yixuan. So therefore, your options are, as always, Branch, because this is like literally the best set ever. But also you can absolutely use the Woodpecker Electro, as well as the Ether set over here. Disc 4, we're looking for crit damage and then crit rate substats. Disc 5, Ether damage bonus, and holy crap, this disc is actually utterly cracked. And then disc 6, we're looking for the HP main stat with the crit rate, crit damage substats if possible. And so what you are going to notice is that I do have a Marcato over here, and as I always say, all roads lead to Marcato. But the reality is that there is actually just not any really good W engines for our girl Yixuan right now. And the reason is because, well, these are our options. There are 4 options, in which one is her signature, one is a BP one, which is actually really good. I am planning to use this one. But the last one is indeed craftable, but this bad boy gives attack, which is kind of weird. Now, I gotta say, the effect is quite nice, and this is absolutely a viable option. But otherwise, there is, of course, always the option of just winging it with one of our other ones, such as our Cannon Rotor, such as our Marcato, which has the crit rate. And that is exactly what I am going to be doing until I do pick up this Radio Wave journey. But again, if you are free to play, I would recommend either Cannon Rotor, Marcato, or if you did pick up any of the other signatures or the Cats one, the steel cushion, this one is actually pretty good too. All right, and so here's the part where I start talking about this panda. And what I do want to say is that today, absolutely yes, he is the best support for Yixuan because he gives sheer force. So if I hop over here, you can see he gives a sheer force boost based on his attack to all of his allies. And on top of that, he also has an extra damage dealt to target buff somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's in his EX skill or something. And so let me say this, even in 2 months time, he is probably still going to be very, very good. But the reality is just like how Seth was the best in slot for Jane, Panda Man one day is unfortunately going to get cucked by some S rank agent eventually. That's just the reality of these games. And so even though Panda is really freaking good right now, I personally am going to hold off investing for resource saving purposes. I want to juice up my other characters like my Rina. I want to juice up my Nekomata, and I still got to finish some of my other supports. That said though, don't let me stop you if you want to give Yixuan the world. Absolutely, Panda is the right thing to do. I'm personally just thinking about it from a resource allocation perspective. All right, and so the last thing is that she may not seem like a god right now, right? There's going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, she's not even Miyabi level. She's so hard to play, but she doesn't even do that much damage. What I will say is that she just does not have the right supports today. My DJs, just wait until she gets 2 S rank supports that are best in slot for Rupture, and she will absolutely soar. And from here on out, what I can tell you is that they are probably going to go anti-Miyabi in terms of content. You're going to start noticing the whole game shill around Yixuan. Either weak, but ice resist. On top of that, we're probably going to see enemies with really high defense, in which Rupture completely ignores. So do not worry about your Yixuan being a bad investment. Of course they're gonna shield her, just trust me. It's literally just business, my guys. And so in that case, my DGens, that is going to bring us to the end of the video. Let me know if this video was helpful to you guys at all, and if it was, then I would really appreciate it if you shared it with your friends. And of course, if I did get anything wrong, or if there are any other tips and tricks that you think maybe we should all know, I would really appreciate that. But otherwise, as always, I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.